Do you stream on a Roku, a Fire Stick, Android TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app. Watch Action News
The
live,
big story on Action News tonight.
the special programming, breaking news, and severe weather updates.
Tremendous amounts of rain.
Always on, always the news team you trust. Watch 6ABC 24/7 on your streaming device. Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
Welcome to the lifestyle segment of Women to Watch. I'm Cheri Morrison. Today I have a very special guest, a master storyteller, narrator, and librettist. So everybody grab your milk and cookies and welcome to the show, Charlotte Blake Alston.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
My pleasure. I've been looking forward to this. I've been reading about you, listening to some of your work, and it's so much fun. I'm learning so much. Charlotte has a gift in her voice. It's powerful, rich, encompassing. It has a cadence that draws you in. I've listened to quite a few of her performances. They are transcendental. I close my eyes. I float off into my imagination like a cartoon character, lifted from the ground, following the wafting smell of something luscious. But before we get into the story of your storytelling, please tell us a little bit about where you're from and your education.
Well, I often like to say that I am Philly born, Philly bred, and when I die, I'll be Philly dead.
That's great.
I grew up in South Philadelphia, raised my kid in West Philadelphia, and I'm just a few stones throw away here in Lansdowne, Pennsylvania. But yes, I grew up in Philadelphia, went to public schools in Philadelphia, and then attended an HBCU, Cheney University, in the good old 1960s.
Wow. That's great. Well, you do have this magical power of drawing people in when you tell a story. How and when did this start?
I think it was, kind of a gradual, incremental process. I think it's a combination of things. One was the seeds for what I'm doing now were really planted by my father, who was outnumbered in our house by musicians. And he could not carry a tune from the living room to the dining room, but he had a passion for language and literature, and kind of began to nurture me when I was very young in oral speaking. And so he wrote some monologues for me to do. He would coach me and how to convey those, the cadence of it, all of those things. But I think also the experiences that I had early on in my teaching career, working with our youngest students from pre-K to second grade. I've taught pre-K through graduate school, with our youngest ones who are developing language skills, that I would begin to incorporate storytelling in my classroom in a range of ways. So I think it was a combination. This was all before I had any thoughts in my head about stepping onto this as my life's work or my life's path. And then certainly when I did, I had the opportunity to be among other people who were applying their trade as storytellers, and to learn from them as well. And over time, I think, as a friend of mine put it, I came into my voice, I came into myself over time.
Well, that's a great way to put it. I mean, your father did a magnificent job at planting that seed. You went on to earn a degree in teaching and taught in Philadelphia for 20 years. You were with Friends Select for 10 of those 20 years. And you also taught part-time at Penn.
Yes.
What happened in that time? What made you realize you wanted to make a change?
Early, when I left high school, what I wanted to do really was to go to New York and sit at the feet of Alvin Ailey. And I was a 3-sport athlete. I was a dancer. And dance to me was another form of athletic expression, but done artfully, so that you could defy gravity for a moment in time and make it look effortless. That was like a high for me. So that's what I wanted to do. And my dad kind of said, no young girl in her right mind would go to New York, first of all, the city of sin, and pursue something, as he put it, as frivolous as dance. You go to college, you get a degree, and you get a real job. So I watched people like my idol, Judith Jamison, not be in her right mind, travel all over the world. But I think that internal desire to fulfill myself artistically never left. And finally, I think it was, I'm giving away a little bit of my age here, but I was 41 at the time. My brother had also set an example, a model for me without knowing it. He taught strings in public school for 1 year and said, "This is not for me. I'm going to survive on my art." And began to develop his skills on both piano and violin, but eventually became one of the greatest, best known jazz violinists in the world. So he had kind of set that model for me initially. But there was just this increasingly intense internal restlessness to explore another aspect of who I was. And the realization hit me at 41 that I had probably lived over half my life already. And what did I want to do with the rest of it? Longevity is not guaranteed. Health is not guaranteed. At the time, we had a mother who had been active in her church, active in the community, and began to make her descent into dementia. So that's something we would never have expected, particularly for her. But it just reminded me that tomorrow is not guaranteed to any of us. So I'm here right now. I have this set of abilities and affinities and yearnings and desires and gifts. I thought even if you believe in reincarnation, you could come back as a moose. So I'm here now. And what do I want to do with the remaining time that I have? That was my thinking at that time. And I just stepped out. I did not take a sabbatical. I didn't say I'm going to take a half a year off. I just left. And I thought the worst that can possibly happen is it won't work. And, I'm not an idiot. I'll decide what I want to do or, fall back on my degree. But I didn't want to wait until I was 65 or 70 and look back and wonder if I could make it work. Also, a new word began to enter the American lexicon at that time. And that word was downsizing. So all of these folks who had spent thousands of dollars in tuition at the Wharton School were having their positions eliminated in corporate America. So that just reiterated once again for me that nothing is guaranteed, even a salaried job. I remember my great aunt said, "You're gonna leave that good job with all those benefits." But I
heard that song.
She lived through the depression, I prayed literally there'd be a net if I fell. And the net turned into a catapult. And it was almost as sort of hokey as it might sound. It was almost as though I was walking in one direction. And then as soon as I turned, all of a sudden, click, 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 all these doors began to open for me. And I remember when my car broke down, I drove pieces of junk for many years. And I was the U-turn queen of West Philadelphia. And I did a U-turn once and my car stopped in the middle of the street. It shut off. Some guys had to come and push it to the side. But I remember calling my brother and I said, "Take me to a car dealership and leave me there." And I came with this new car and I called a friend and I said, "I just got this new car. I've left my job. I'm just stepping out on this. I don't know how I'm going to pay for it." And she said, "Claim it. Claim it. You need a dependable car to do what you are about to do." I said, "Okay." I never missed a car payment. So every time I needed a door to open for me financially, it did. And I didn't seek it out. It often came to me. So I think we often look at risk as a negative in our culture, but I think we need to lay that to rest, that the world is open to you. And I often tell young people, you are the only you who has ever existed on the planet before. So this is the time that you've been given this gift of life and being here, and you've come in with gifts. So this is the time for you to nurture those and see what it is you can offer to the world as well. So that was the motivation behind it. But I have to tell you, I still get pangs if I go to see a dance company. Up a
well, you can go see them all the time now, and you're in the right venues to be able to do that. So what do you think it is about storytelling that's so special? What do you think it brings to our world and the community and our culture?
Well, I think, first of all, it's arguably the oldest art form in existence as human beings began to develop language and ways of communicating orally. They began to tell stories. The hunters would go off on the hunt, come back with the meat for the entire village or community, and then they would retell the story of the hunt. Everyone would gather around to hear that story. It would be told in spoken word. They might dance a part of that story as well. So it's probably the oldest art form in existence as people looked around in the early days of the world and saw the sun and the moon, rivers, oceans, people, animals. They were awed by these things and created stories to offer some kind of a thought or stimulate conversation about how these things came into existence and their place in that environment, that there was something much bigger and greater than themselves. Stories were often used to continue to teach children and adults as well, and reinforce those shared values in a community, to remind people of their behaviors and their interactions with one another. As people migrated from one part of the world to another, they took their stories with them. People would hear those stories. They might change them just a little bit to fit their particular cultural context, but the essence of the story still remains the same. And essentially, for me, those stories, and particularly the traditional ones that have been passed down, embody the collective wisdom of mankind. They speak to human interaction, human foibles, human strengths, human suffering, human dilemmas, decisions that we have to make, good versus evil, sometimes multi-layered complex issues that are not easy to solve. There's a whole collection of stories in West Africa that are known as dilemma tales, where the storyteller doesn't give the resolution. It's left to the listeners to discuss and talk about. Characters, you'll find trickster characters in just about every story culture in the world. And if anybody listening to this right now, if you go back far enough in your own ethnic history and ethnic background, you will find an oral tradition. So before there was the written word, there was the spoken word. So I once gave a presentation talking about the importance of keeping folk tales alive, traditional stories alive. And there's a trickster character in Aztec culture, it's either Aztec or Inca, called Huehuecoyote. We consider that to be an ancient culture. Hue means old. So here in an ancient culture, they had a character called Old Coyote. So tricksters have always been among us. They're still among us. The stories remind us that we need to be mindful of the tricksters who are around us and not have our vision clouded, the vision of truth clouded. So those stories, as I said, I think embody the collective wisdom of mankind. There's a storyteller, Elizabeth Ellis, who always says they're not good because they're old because they're good. And certainly storytellers tell contemporary versions of many of those traditional tales as well. But I think it reminds us of and helps make a connection as human beings, the commonalities that we share as human beings on the planet.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. You've performed on national and regional stages, including the Smithsonian Institute, the National Museum of Women in the Arts, John F. Kennedy Center for Performing Arts, along with locations all over the world. Quite impressive. You've been working with the Philadelphia Orchestra for 31 years. In 2004, you received a phone call from the orchestra. They had a conductor, Thomas Wilkins, that had requested you narrate excerpts of Martin Luther King's The Dream speech while they were playing Barber's Adagio. Can you tell us a little bit about that story? And we don't have a lot of time, so.
The first thing I thought, and I think I voiced it, was, you want me to talk over the Barber Adagio? I can't listen to that work without becoming emotional. But what Thomas had done was taken excerpts of the Dream speech and married them with Barber's Adagio, so that the crescendos and the increase in the tension, the emotional tension of the work, matches the increase in the emotional intensity of the Dream speech. So it worked, and it has worked in subsequent years since. I've done it many times here with the orchestra and with other orchestras as well.
Yeah, at least 20 years now you've been doing it with Philadelphia.
Yes.
Yeah, you do a remarkable job. You're a member of the National Black Storytellers Association, and you've been featured storyteller at both presidential and gubernatorial inaugural festivities. What were some of the most exciting and memorable moments you've had as a storyteller?
There's so many there, and they're really varied. The opportunity just a few weeks ago was the National Black Storytelling Festival is coming up in a couple of weeks. It will be in Baltimore this year. We rotate around the country, and it brings in storytellers from all over the diaspora, from here in the States, from the islands, from the African continent. A few weeks ago was the National Storytelling Festival in Jonesboro, Tennessee. The storytelling community is quite an incredibly rich and diverse community, and we feel like a family. We had Trina McIntyre, who's you picked from Alaska. We had our first female cowgirl, a poet and musician who's 21 years old, played with her brother who is 17 years old. I had a set, thankfully, with one of my storyteller friends, Motoko, who is Japanese. So we get this wonderful diversity of storytellers. It's a wonderful, diverse group of human beings who come together and share. So there have been many highlights. I think, on some level, the most memorable are the opportunities I have to go into spaces where particularly young people, I've done it with adults as well, but young people are incarcerated. It's a community that is a very needy community. And they really have an appreciation when artists come in. I ended one program, we did a Q&A. It was a pregnant pause. I was ready to say goodbye. And a girl way in the back raised her hand. She looked to be no more than 15 years old and incarcerated. And her question was, what does it feel like to touch people's hearts? And I had my first experience of feeling my knees start to buckle when she said that. So it just told me that there was a connection made to this girl who was in this environment of being incarcerated, but it still made a connection. So, there's the big stages, there's all of that, but then there are those kinds of experiences as well that will make keep me impressed, will make a lifelong impression on me.
Well, as your email tagline says, words have power, use them thoughtfully.
Yes.
Between that, which is part I got out of your starfish story, and your TED talk about the hunter Agalusa, which sums up storytelling, nothing is truly dead unless it is forgotten and not spoken of again. So everybody keep telling your stories. They keep our heritage, our culture, and our memories rich and alive. Charlotte, I'm sorry we're out of time. Thank you for taking the time to spend with us today and sharing your story.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Sure. For more information about Charlotte, her performances, past, present, and future, go to www.charlotteblakealston.com. Sue will be right back after the break to close out the show. Ladies, keep living your dreams.
Action News, celebrating 50 years with AccuWeather.
The heat is on. In 2010, Philadelphia had a record of 55 days at or over 90 degrees. And those scorchers, they're on the rise. In fact, 10 of the 15 hottest summers occurred in the last 2 decades. Thank you for always trusting us to keep you informed.
You're streaming and we're streaming. Get the AccuWeather forecast and severe storm alerts 24/7 on our 6ABC streaming app.
Whether you're just getting started, already well on your way, planning for your future, drafting your vision, growing toward greatness, or finding that dreams really can come true. Whatever your next steps are, we'll be right here with you, just like we have been for 150 years. Start here, grow here, stay here. Penn Community Bank. Here we grow.